Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. My next guest has been speaking out on the plight of Christians in Iraq and Syria for many years. With the anticipated liberation of Mosul from the grips of ISIS, there are new hopes and fears among the people living in Iraq, especially Christians and religious minorities. Joining me to discuss the situation on the ground is Father Benedict Kiely. He's the founder of Nazarene.org. Father,
thank you.
Great to have you back. I want to start with 2 years ago. ISIS came in, expelled so many of the indigenous people from these territories, 125,000 Christians and Yazidis and religious minorities. What do they come back to? Are there enough of them to come back?
A very good question, Raymond. Before I answer it, though, I'd like to thank you especially because you've been a real champion for these people over the last several years. You've highlighted them when so much of the mainstream media has forgotten them. So they thank you.
Thank you.
What do they go back to? They go back to, I saw today pictures of the town of Karakosh, which was the largest Christian town in Iraq, destroyed. They go back to lack of trust. One priest said to me, "My house was taken by my neighbors. My 800-year-old church is an ISIS torture center." He said, "How can we live with these people?" So they go back to lack of trust. They go back to a fear of governance. And most of all, who will protect them?
Well, that's the question. Is the government able to protect them? I talk to Iraqis on the ground. They tell me, well, yeah, we're worried about these Islamic radicals, but the government's not much better.
They don't trust the government. They don't trust the government in Baghdad. They don't trust the Kurdish government for one simple reason, because they ran away. They basically say that if they ran away once, why won't they run away again? There is no trust. Priest after priest, nun after nun, layperson after layperson said to me, "We have no trust."
Now, what do Christians tell you when you're on the ground? I mean, you've visited them in the refugee camps, on the outskirts of cities like Mosul. What are they telling you? Do they want to go home, or are they just, have they had it?
Just under 2 years ago, when I went in May 2015, about 80% said they wanted to go home. There was optimism, there was a real feeling that we'll be back. When I went in January of this year, it was down to about 50%. This time, I'm afraid it's 80% want to leave. There's a tiredness. Even one of the wonderful nuns, the Dominican nuns who were driven out by ISIS, one of the nuns just with a tired face said to me, we want to live in peace, and they have no hope of living in peace. Most of them, even though the hierarchy of the church is against it, most of the Christians want to leave.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, people don't understand. For generations, indeed centuries, Catholics and Christians and Yazidis and Muslims lived side by side as neighbors. And a priest told me recently at an event, he said, you know, you wake up one afternoon, and these people that you've broken bread with, you've picked their children up out of the street, you've helped their family, suddenly they're turning you into ISIS. They're breaking through the door with ISIS forces. Can the trust ever be repaired again? That's the big question.
It's the big question, and it's very hard to answer. One person said to me, and I can only report what I heard, I wanted to listen more than anything else. Ask questions, but listen. Because so often we go in with a prejudiced view. We think we have the answers. One person said to me, and it may be sounding intolerant, but they said inside every Sunni is a little ISIS, little tiny piece of ISIS. In other words, they really don't want Christians around, even though Christians have been there from the beginning. Disciples of Christ founded the church in Iraq. So that doesn't sound good, it sounds a little prejudiced, but there are many good Muslims helping, but there's that great fear. ISIS is like a snake. When ISIS goes, some of our viewers and listeners might think, well, Mosul's going to be liberated, Christians can go home. When the head of ISIS is cut off, just like a snake, another thing will appear with another name.
Well, that's why I think trying to battle this only with the military force, this is a losing game. You take the ground, you lose the ground. You take the ground, you lose the ground. It's not like the animus and the ideology and the hatred driving this movement will dissipate. It remains. That has to be dealt with. Why isn't there some attempt to deal with it on both a spiritual and a practical level?
I think it's because the Middle East now is such a cauldron. The Baghdad government is effectively not in charge. You know, we're dealing with, as one Iraqi Christian said to me, we're dealing with a Shia-Sunni civil war. between Iraq, between Iran, Saudi Arabia, and as always, the Christians, the Yazidis, the Shabak, the religious minorities are in the middle with no one to protect them. And it's important for the viewers and listeners to know it's not just the Christians. The Yazidis and the Shabak, who are Muslim, they say the same thing. They say, no one will defend us, no one will protect us. And the worst thing of all, Raymond, I have to say, is the shock and horror that they perceive. Why will America, why will Britain, why will Europe not help Christians? Right. Is there a prejudice against Christians? It was very embarrassing to have to try and answer that.
I want to play you something, and the viewers. This is the Chaldean Patriarch, Luis Rafael Sacco, and he's speaking in Arabic. I'll translate. He says here, the Iraqi forces liberated this land. Before there were Christians, before there were Muslims, there was the holy soil of Iraq. We are proud of the achieved victory. There is some damage in the church, but damages can be repaired. I encourage all people to return to their homes and villages. Is this possible?
You're asking the very difficult question, because one fully understands the patriarch, the hierarchy. There's that horror of Christianity disappearing from the Middle East. And it was there long before Islam. Yeah. However, people said to me, a man said to me, he said, I want my children to grow up in peace. One priest said to me, he asked the same question, he said, people are more important than the land. People are even more important than the churches. We can keep our faith. Look at Detroit in the USA, strong Chaldean Syriac Catholic community. So one understands why the patriarch is saying this sort of thing, but I have to say, on the ground, there are a lot of people who don't really agree with that.
Yeah. Is there a post-liberation plan in place?
No, and that's the crucial point. 6 weeks ago when I was there, right before this was imminent, people were saying, no, there's no plan, and perhaps the assault has been launched with a view to a certain person's legacy. Certain person not far from us here, that it'll be important to say the liberation of Mosul took place. There's no plan. There's no plan for a post-Mosul liberation.
And of course the refugee situation is only likely to increase in Europe as well as the United States.
The potential is that 1 million Sunnis will pour out of Mosul into the empty Christian villages, which will mean the Christians will never go back. So without being a conspiracy theorist, it's very easy to see a possible conspiracy, that the Christians will never be able to go home.
How much do you blame American policy and the first incursion into Iraq for what we're seeing today?
As with many people, I thought the Iraq war was right. I know you didn't.
I didn't.
But no, it's very clear that it was a Pandora's box. It uncorked something which is impossible to put back together again now. I don't believe, actually, there can be such a place as a unified Iraq or Syria.
Well, so sad. I mean, the suffering is so intense. The heartbreak of the people when you talk to them, and you have, is profound. It's their land.
But we can still do something, Raymond. We can help them. We can still support them. We can give jobs. That's one of the most important things now, is to provide work. So we don't just give handouts to people. We give them some dignity. And people can help by going to Nazarean.org, Nasarean.org. That's Father Kiely's great enterprise that helps both the Iraq and Syrian Christians who are suffering and living under intolerable circumstances. Father, thank you so much Raymond.
for being here,
Thank
for
you.
all you do.